Hi, this is Dan Sefton, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
My name's Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 106 for July 14th, 2020. Well, today I'm very pleased to bring you an interview with Dan Sefton, who is a UK show creator and showrunner, and also the co-founder of Seven Seas Films. It's going to be a fascinating time listening to the differences between the UK and the US, how shows are created and run in the UK, and lots about the UK writing process, both interesting to any UK writers out there and also to US writers who want to learn from how they do things in the UK. There's some definitely big differences and many things that we could learn. In particular, it's a very author-based system, auteur, as you will. If you're interested in more interviews with UK writers, I want to mention that episode 44, I had an interview with UK writer John Finch, and in episode 80, I had an interview with a writing team in the UK, James Whitehouse and Hannah George. Look them up on the podcast site, tvwriterpodcast.com, or any of the aggregators that you can find this podcast. This episode is sponsored by Pilar Alessandra of onthepage.tv. Be sure to check out all the resources and classes on her site, and she also offers one-on-one coaching via Zoom. TV Writer Podcast viewers can get 10% off on any of her services. Just reach out to Pilar directly and tell her I sent you. But for now, on to my interview with Dan Sefton. Enjoy. Well, I am so excited to be interviewing literally across the Atlantic with Dan Sefton, writer and co-founder of Seven Seas Films. He's a creator and showrunner based in the UK. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to speak to you.
Very, very cool. And I really appreciate the perspective that you're going to give our listeners, because you are currently creating and running shows in the UK, and I know that you have done a lot of those based on spec scripts, which is not necessarily the style of how things are developed in the UK, and we want to learn all about that.
Okay, yeah, well, any questions you have, I'll try and answer them.
Okay, perfect. Now, first I wanted to start out because you had a sort of a unique background in how it led to writing. I've interviewed over 100 writers, and I've never heard somebody with your particular story. You started out as a doctor.
Yes, and I still am. I've been there working the last 4 days in the emergency room in where I work in Somerset. So yeah, and that was how. So I started at about the year 2000, just before that, and I was in my medical career. I was at sort of a natural break point. And I had a friend who was working for the BBC, who I knew through medical colleagues, who was a script editor. And we were talking about the shows that she was doing. And I'd just come from a medical careers course from somebody who advertises in a medical journal to say, if you're not quite sure where you want to go as a doctor, here are other alternative careers. And one of the things that she identified, and it was very unusual for doctors to have. She was a doctor herself, but she did a course that was very unusual for doctors. It was very kind of touchy-feely, it was something I wasn't very comfortable with, where I was coming from at all. And she said, "Oh, you should be a writer. You clearly like writing." And I'd done lots of writing as a kid at school, creative writing, composition, and I'd always found it quite straightforward. But I never thought you could do it as a job,
Yeah.
And then she said, "Well, why don't you go to a course?" So I went on a screenwriting course, which was an evening course in London, and it was great. I mean, it was interesting that I really connected with it very quickly, because I'd watched a load of TV, a load of film, a load of American shows, particularly at that time. The American on Channel 4 was showing things like Roseanne and Frasier, Cheers, really big hit shows. So I was watching them, and seemed to come, I understood what they were doing. And then I said to my friend Jenny, who was the BBC script editor, "Well, I'm a writer now, because I've done a course. I've done like sort of four evenings, so I could do this." And she was running on a show called Doctors, which is still going now in the UK. It's a daytime sort of soap drama about a GP practice. And so I pitched her a couple of stories, and she was like, "Okay, these are pretty good. What can you write a scene by scene? Like a step outline?" I was like, "What is that?" He sort of said, "Oh, well, you need to do this. You sent me something." I was like, okay. So I did that, and they commissioned a script. So I was like, "Oh, right, fine, I'll do that." So I looked at some scripts on the internet, and I did the script, and then they handed it in. So this is really good. Yeah, fine. You know, do you want to do another one? I was like, okay. So it was ridiculously fortunate. I mean, literally the first script I ever wrote was shot and made. Wow. and so I did this incredible fast start, and I was working on this show, which was fun, and it was because it was a daytime show, and it was run by some good, creative, interesting people, but there wasn't a huge amount of supervision across it. So you got to do, you've got quite a lot of creative freedom to have fun, make some more humorous episodes, which is still happening today with the show. It's quite innovative. And I just started working. And then, of course, I had a whole different challenge to go from doing a show like that to write on my own material and understanding what I wanted to do, which type of shows I wanted to write. But it was a very weird start. And of course, ever through my career, the fact that I'm a doctor, I've worked most of the time when I've been writing. I've had people have liked to hire me as on medical shows, and I've created medical shows because obviously it's makes everything much easier.
Wow, that is. I mean, from a perspective here, there are quite a lot of medical consultants on shows. So say, for instance, there might be a working doctor who consults to make sure that all of the terminology they use is accurate or that kind of thing. And there's also a lot of doctors and lawyers who will make the move completely into television. But I've never heard of somebody who continues in their profession and continues to write like that. That is really cool. And do you pull a lot of the material from your real world experiences?
I don't know. I mean, very rarely would I go, oh my God, I've got to put that in, because I found in general, especially the type of shows that I am mainly working on, that the reality for me is quite a lot darker and quite a lot more nihilistic than the typical popular medical show. So really, you have to sort of take inspiration for moments, but then retool it to something which has a narrative, which has a generally kind of, if not always upbeat, some kind of meaning to it. And that's been my sort of takeaway from working all these years. Actually, that most of the things that stay with you as a doctor are things that are, for me, are very black and nihilistic and just depressing. But I'm aware that people don't really want that reflected to them in a mainstream TV show. I mean, there is space for it, but that kind of editing, that kind of understanding that truth isn't always as interesting as a good story, I think is quite important.
Yeah, and there's, in a story, generally speaking, some kind of resolution that's happy in the end, and that's, I imagine, not always the case.
Yes, exactly. Or even some kind of, a lesson sounds a bit trite, but the best stories that people make in those shows have some kind of irony or point to make in some subtle way, which real life often doesn't, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now you actually were able to achieve quite a bit of success in your television writing. How did you juggle that? And did you move to a point where you were primarily writing and the medical was on the side, or how have you managed to balance those?
Well, I was always part-time. So the good thing about working in emergency medicine is that you could always work shifts. So I was working shifts, maybe 1 or maybe 2 or 3 a week, and then having the rest of the time for writing. So I found there's a period when I thought that people would only take me seriously if I was a full-time writer. And so I quit for 2 or 3 years and then had the opportunity to come back. And by that time, I'd realized that about the opposite was the case, that you are much more interesting as a writer if you had some kind of story or angle or personality or thing, that a point of difference that people could remember. So then it worked very well. And I found it psychologically and creatively quite good, because it meant that, I would get out of my own way. When I had to go and do a shift, I couldn't worry about notes or TV or something. It was a bit pathetic. But then at the same time, once I'd done a couple of days of hard work, and I was glad to get back to my desk and, have that life. So that balance, I think, is really good. And I don't know, maybe people who are writing, I don't think enough writers do enough of it. What are you doing to get yourself away from the desk? And that balance being, having your, like Stephen King says, about actually turning up all the time, which I think is very important. At the same time, going and doing something to find material that's truthful and interesting. And so I always found that was very useful for me.
And so in the beginning, you were writing these, what we would call them here, freelance scripts. But here what generally happens is once you you write a script, you're shopping for an agent, and after that, your agent will do a lot of the negotiating for you. People here often will have both an agent and a manager. Manager is sort of somebody who helps them to manage their career, and an agent will sort of negotiate the deals. What is the situation with representation in the UK?
Well, I've had the same representation from the very beginning. With my first agent was a guy called Nick Harris, who worked out of I think it was AP Watt then, and he was a great guy. Very sadly, he went to America. Actually, very sadly, he died of cancer when he was very young.
So
it was very, very sad. But he was a good guy. I mean, he gave me advice on my career in quite in probably a crossover way, you know. But what I didn't realize when I started was that how much of it I had to be self-generated. I had to sort of make my own choices. Yes, going to meetings. I didn't understand what a meeting was when I started. I didn't understand that people were giving me their time, and I had to perform and give them something back. And it was an opportunity for me where I was going, well, I've written something, you've read it, you liked it, now come and tell me what you want me to do. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And when those lessons were in retrospect, I was quite slow to learn those lessons. Didn't quite understand what the business was about, and how much of, as a writer, you are freelance, you are generating your own work, and how do you do that? What are you pitching? Why are you pitching to this person? Why do you think it's a good idea? And I think some agents do more, less or more of that. But I think for me, as I've got more experienced, as I have got my own company, working with my company, my current agent, Christine, who was Nick's assistant, I've been with ever since. She's very much more about finding opportunities for me, interesting opportunities, then putting them my way, and I decide whether that's a good idea or not. I'm often wrong, and she's a really good ear, and we'll discuss things. But for me, it was always, you had to be your own manager. You had to make your own decisions.
So in the beginning, you were writing standalone episodes, and so it sounds like, especially when you were continuing to work as a doctor, you were writing just what we would call freelance scripts here and there. What would that look like? Would you go to the show and you'd pitch your idea for the episode, and they would say, yes, we like that, write it, or how would that work?
Yes, exactly that, Rudy. I mean, you would get a meeting with the people running the shows. You would pitch an idea for the episode. They would talk about stuff that they were doing with it. I think in this country, I've not worked in America, so this might be not 100% correct, but we do have a sort of a level of people in the creative process who are creative producers, effectively, who don't actually write dialogue, but do a lot of the other work involved in storylining, character work, planning series. And so there's a career and a world you can be in where you can be an episode writer on a British returning series, where you come in, you understand the show, you pitch an episode, they like it, they will hand you 4 or 5 bits of stuff which is going on in their serial arcs for their characters, and that you'll do it, and then you'll just write the drafts, and if they like it, that's great. I mean, in a way that like a American half-hour comedy may be done, but there's less of a room. It's much more controlled from the central point, where people go, well, you need to do this, go away and do it. You go in, you hand it in, and then people will say, actually, things have changed since you've been away, we want to do this, can you change it? So a lot of your workload is actually just changing, altering things to fit the span of the series. And one progression you can have then is to become become a core writer, they call it in a lot of the series. So you're actually involved in more of the storyline decisions. You're helping to shape the series more towards an American showrunner, but the final decision is always with a producer who's a non-writer who runs the show effectively.
That is very interesting. So are there any shows that have a more Hollywood style writing room?
It is coming more and more. I mean, the biggest issue that we always had, as far as I was aware, was money, in the sense that there was never enough money to buy people for a season and say, you're exclusive to this show. You write, you come into the office, you sit, you come to all the meetings, you write your episodes as they would in the US. It was always on a sort of a part-time basis, ironically for me, in the sense you would commit to a show and maybe you do 3 or 4 episodes, which I often did, but you were slightly to one side of the process. And there are great advantages with that as well, because you could be working on your spec screenplay or a play or whatever else you want to be doing. You can be earning some money as a working writer, and you can be as involved as you want to be. But if you really want to be involved in how the show is shaped, then that doesn't really work very well for you. You know, you're peripheral.
So the core writers, though, are involved with these producers, and they're more involved in how the show is shaped.
Yes, exactly, and that relationship can be very, very productive. I mean, I've had some great relationships with producers who are effectively writing, in my view. They just don't write much dialogue, or if any dialogue, and that becomes a very fun and interesting creative process, very much like a writer's room, in any other place. But there are tensions in that approach as well, because again, they're not writing. So if somebody tells you what to write and they don't know how, if they tell you to do something you don't think is going to work or is very difficult, it can be a bit like, it can build tensions. The tension, there's two different kind of, there's always like officers and men almost, it's that kind of tension, which is that's where the cracks can appear. I don't think either system is perfect. I think there are obviously pros and cons, but that's one of the key differences.
Interesting. And so is it common for any of these non-writing producers to move to the writing position, or are they very much delineated?
That's happened quite a lot more recently. It's become a more common way in to be a writer is to actually become a script editor on a show and then start to pitch ideas and say, I want to write an episode. If you're well liked and are doing well, then that's often a way in. And then once you've done that, you can jump over the line and you become a writer. And often those people are very good and successful at running and working on those shows. It's quite a smart way in, I think, because it allows you to get an insider view of how these things are working, and then jump over the line, really.
Mm-hmm. And so now you talked about how one level above that is definitely the showrunner, the person who creates and runs the show. Like here is very much the captain of the ship over the creative content. Talk about for you when you made that jump and what that jump was like for you. I started to work on those continuing dramas. This was 10, 15 years ago, and was a core writer in a couple of them, and was involved in it, but felt it was fundamentally unsatisfying. It wasn't where I wanted to stay. And I've always said, if that's where you want to stay there. It's great. If you don't, move, but just don't stay there and sort of bitch about it. So I decided, well, I was going to move. A few years after I got one of the first original commissions which was a show called Trust Me, which was on the BBC a few years ago, and that was with a company called Red Productions. And Nicola Schindler is the MD of Red. She's an incredible woman and very, very talented, and has made some incredible shows. And it was during that process, I remember I'd written the episodes, and they asked me if I wanted to come to the edit, and I was like, "Oh no, it's fine. Don't worry about it." And they were sort of very surprised. Why aren't you coming to the edit? I was like, well, it's fine, because before there was no point. You weren't invited, and nobody gave a crap what you had to say. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I came to the edit and I watched what she was doing, and she was writing down notes. And then I pretended to write some down as well, but I couldn't get the time codes right, this kind of stuff. And then at the end, she was like, okay, right, this is wrong. This, I don't like this. You need to change this. This is great. I was like, fucking hell, there's a whole process here, which I've missed out on, which I know nothing about how, because before I would just deliver a script, they go great. And I would see it for the first time when it was transmitted, you go, oh, that's what they did, And so then I went to the dub, to see what we're doing with that. And that was a revelation to me. I was like, oh, okay. And it wasn't like suddenly you're like, I'm in charge now. I'm the auteur. It was just like, okay, I've got a voice. I can say, actually, I don't like this edit. I think this could work better here.
and you get into the rhythm of it. And so it was that experience, that specific experience, which made me think, now there's a whole level of creativity which I need to access if I'm going to create shows how I want them to be created, and also for me to feel they've got the best chance of being successful, whether that's commercially or artistically or whatever. And then for the subsequent shows that I've been working on, particularly one called The Mallorca Files, which is a BBC soft crime show, also ZDF in Germany as well as international. All the writers that we brought onto that, I said, well, this is how we're going to work. I want you to come to the edit on your episodes, come to the dub, go to set, meet the cast, discuss casting, look at casting tapes again, which is something I've never done. If you want to, if you don't want to, it's fine. Just do us a great script, we'll do it. But if you want to, all this is open for you, and you can learn what's going on and see what the wider process is in going from a script to a finished transmittable piece of television. And almost everybody jumped at that challenge, really enjoyed it. And one of the writers on the first series of Mallorca Files has had her own show called Miss Scarlet and the Duke on A&E Network, and she was using that process because she was in the late development process then of going, okay, what do I do? How do I talk to these actors? What do I do? What happens with casting? So, and then she really loved it. And so that was the specific change. It was, and there are pros and cons. A lot of times I go, I wish I was just writing the bloody script. I could just dump it on people, because you're getting all the hassle, as US showrunners know. There's loads of hassle that goes with it. Yeah. And sometimes I'm just thinking, God, I can't be bothered. So,
talk about so now that you've had this revelation that you really want to work this way, tell me about the process of when you created these shows that you created. When did you get the idea? How did you pitch it? What was the spec script like? You mentioned doing some spec scripts. How did you get these shows off the ground?
Well, it was a process of, towards the end of working on Holby City, which is the returning medical soap on the BBC, I deliberately stopped doing it and then wrote a spec script, which was it was kind of time travel, slightly sci-fi, high concept script. And I wrote it I was going to pitch it as a pitch to people. And I made the decision, actually, I'm not going to, because I know what the process will be. It will be like, we're not sure. This could be interesting. Could you change it? 6 months down the line, you've lost any interest in doing it. So I just started. I came up with the idea. I wrote the first 4 pages, showed it to a friend of mine and a colleague who was a good script editor. I said, would you like to read more of this? He went, yeah, that sounds interesting. Fine. Then I wrote the whole thing and gave it to my agent. And my agent started sending it out as a sample of my work. And from there, I started to get a different level of kind of call to say, would you come in and talk to this production company about creating a show? Usually, could you do a medical show? But creating shows, original shows. And that was that's the process in the UK, in that you start to collaborate with independent production companies, pitching concepts for shows to networks, and seeing if you can get somebody to bite. And that involves them usually paying you a small amount to work up treatments and pitches, and then sending them to broadcasters, or pitching them verbally to the broadcasters. And if you get a nibble, you will go in and meet with the broadcaster and try and get that show into paid development, so the broadcaster will generally pay for you to write the script. So then the advantages of the system are that you're already kind of working creatively with a commissioner for a channel who wants that thing. They think they do at the time. So you're should be pushing an open door. If you can deliver on the promise of the idea with a great script and storylines for the rest of the series, you can sort of creep closer and closer to a green light the whole time. So, and that has worked for me on occasions. The Good Karma Hospital worked it on exactly that way, which we pitched an idea of a hospital show set in India to animated to ITV. They really liked the idea. It went through several drafts, several reimaginations, but eventually the script got all the way to the top of the head of the channel. He said, "Yes, make it." So he made it.
The interesting thing about that is actually a snapshot of how reality TV is developed here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating. As you describe that process, it's virtually the exact process of how reality TV is developed. the scripted TV is a completely different thing. But that's very much how I almost wonder if somebody learned from the UK process and brought it here.
I mean, it does work. I mean, I think the downside of it, particularly from a writing point of view, is that is that between concept and script, there's a lot of to and froing, and in that process, what you originally liked about it can get completely lost, and you could end up trying to do something which you never really wanted to do in the first place, and just sort of losing that drive that writers have to actually create something from nothing. And you can get just beaten down by treatment after treatment after treatment, which isn't really going in the right direction. Classic development hell, but never actually writing the script. And so I think that there's a freedom that I find when you write a pilot script just for yourself. You can do it, and then you're saying to people, "This is what I think it is. Do you have any thoughts? How do we change it?" Rather than lots of people trying to work out what it is in the first place. For me, that's really should be the writer's job. The idea of concept, style, tone, that's what you're bringing to the party, and you should be able to do. So there is a downside to it.
Yeah. Well, at what point did you create your own company? And tell me why you needed to, how you benefit from that, what the role of your company is.
Didn't need to. I mean, mainly it was because a good colleague, a friend of mine and colleague, Simon Lupton, who's the co-director of the company, we've known each other for years. We went to school together. We hooked up again when he was a commissioner of comedy and I was a comedy writer. It's like, hi, Si, good to see you. But we wanted to work together. We'd worked together on a project, and we had developed to the channel and hadn't actually gone all the way, but we enjoyed the process. And I think we both thought, well, we can, with our own company, we can actually widen out what we're doing. The two things we can do is I can get involved in stuff like non-scripted stuff, which Simon's got a very strong background in non-scripted entertainment and documentaries, as well as scripted comedy. So I was excited about that. He could get more into scripted drama and scripted comedy. Also, we could work with other writers and talented people that we knew and work with them and have more ideas than I could just write myself flying around. So it was almost a sense of we can widen these things out. The other thing I'd noticed through the working with channels was that really, until you're the head of the company, until your production company is making the show, you're always one step removed from the conversations between the channel and the show. And I don't mind that. I mean, I generally have very good relationships with people I work with in production companies, and I'm very happy to let them do that. But I think once you've crossed that first thing about, I just want to get a show made. Once you've done that, for me, it was like, well, not only do I want to get a show made, I want to have it to be successful. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be hugely commercially successful. I just want it to sort of realize what it can be and not be, or try my hardest to make that happen. And that, I think, for me, it involves being in the grown-up conversation about the channel, going, do you know what, this show's just not working for us because it's not getting the right audience. Can you do anything about it? And I'm always like, well, yeah, I'll try. I'd rather have that conversation than just be not part of it. I think it's the understanding that this is a craft stroke art which is commercially driven in many ways, and it has to hit some kind of commercial target. You have to do something with it, and it's like, well, I think it's a creative challenge. How do I make the people who like this kind of show really love this show? That I think you need to be able to communicate with the channel. The channel needs to send you the audience feedback. You need to have access to that. You need to know what they're saying, warts and all. Often it's nice instinct. People want to protect the writer and the curator from the nasty people saying nasty things about their show. But I just felt it's easier just to have that face on and go, okay, if this isn't working, why isn't it working? What can I learn from this? Is there anything to learn from this, or is it just bad luck?
Very, very cool. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll come back to talk about a lot of the differences between the UK and the US and advice to other writers. DrivingFootage.com provides 4K 9-angle driving plates for film and television. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with more areas coming soon. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots and second-unit photography. Visit drivingfootage.com for details. avgearguide.com provides computer and gear rentals serving the LA area, including laptops with Final Draft, as low as $9 a day with long booking rates available. They also scan photos, documents, video and audio tapes, and film reels to digital, so you can easily share with your friends and family. Mention the name of the TV Writer Podcast and you will get 10% off your order. Visit avgearguide.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person video interviews to you. And we're back. You have worked for several series as a showrunner, and I know that you have mentioned a few times that you're comparing to how things are done in the U.S. So obviously, you've learned about a lot of the way things work in the U.S. What would you say? How would you say the UK showrunner template is different than the way we do it, and what do you think we could learn from the way you do it?
I've not run a show in the US or been around or worked on a show on staff, so this is with that caveat. I can really talk about what I understand about how you guys run your shows. I'm certainly on what we do. I'm a big fan of American drama. I mean, all the stuff that I've done from the very beginning of my career is I've been looking across. This isn't just, kissing ass, but looking across Atlantic, particularly the era of Sopranos, Breaking Bad, the golden age of TV. I mean, I was looking across at the Dexter shows like that, looking at that. They are really raising the bar. Those were the scripts I was reading. Those were the ideas that I was trying to pitch. Sometimes feeling very frustrated that you're going, this is exactly the sort of show that you're buying, from the US and lionizing, but this could be the same kind of show, but you're not making it. So I don't think there's much that we can teach you. I always felt that must have been evolved, the most efficient way of doing volume. I mean, what the difference I think is we've never done volume. We've always had it authored. So most seasons are still about 6 episodes, 6 hours, which I always thought sort of had evolved to be just about the amount that one guy or one woman can write in a run without going mad. 6 hours, you can just about do 6 and keep the quality up and get it delivered on time. More than that, either you're very, very quick and just probably, got some kind of sleeping disorder, or some other problem. But most normal people with a family and responsibilities and just the amount of pressure it is can do that. So I think that's why we've evolved. So I think we're a much more authored system, and in some ways that can be an easier and more efficient way of doing it, because with the broadcasters and the companies, they know what they're getting there. They've got a writer they know they can deliver. 6 hours, they can do it. We're paying them, great. We'll probably get it done. When you start to factor in that person hiring people in team writing, it becomes a lot more complicated because not everybody can do it to the same standard. Then it's like, who's going to rewrite? So one of the big differences is that the idea of a polish is not really very common in the UK. I mean, it's very much seen as a mark of failure, really, if your script is rewritten by anybody. And
really?
Yeah, I mean, writers here get very angsty if anybody touches their scripts. Everything's very, very siloed, which I think can be good or bad. I mean, I've tried the shows that I've been most involved with showrunning, which is the show with Cosmopolitan, which is the Yorker Files. One of the things I put down in the manifesto that we jokingly put on our WhatsApp group was that being rewritten by me at some point was not a mark of failure. It was just the fact that we needed to get the tone right, and that some bits might just not fit, and there might be time issues, and it doesn't matter. What I wanted people to bring to the show, because it's an episodic crime show, is a really good idea for stories and characters. If you can do that, that's for me is the hard work, which I don't want to have to do all by myself. I don't have time to do that. That's got a 10-episode run, so it's much more intensive. But that was quite new for people, going, oh, okay, we tried very hard, and it worked to a large extent to get a much more of a team vibe with the show. So everybody was reading each other's scripts. We had more meetings. People knew what was going on. They'd met the cast. They met the directors. we were trying to say, look, you're creating this whole thing, not just one episode of it. I think when the British system works badly, it's when people just I want to write the best episode ever of this. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm not changing any of my stories, because this fits with my episode, and then everybody's going to watch my episode of whatever, and that's it. Not a sense of ownership of the whole season and the whole show.
So do you think that the American model could be adopted in the UK? I mean, obviously not across the industry, but if you decided that you wanted to do it the way it's done in the States, with a full writer's room and the process involved in that, could it be done in the UK?
I think it has been done. I mean, it has been done on several shows. The difficulties with it are that the type of money just talking reality, the type of money you're talking about, I don't know the full whack at the moment. The understanding of you being hired as a staff writer for a season in an American writer's room, compared to how much money you would get, or production companies could pay writers to sit in the writer's room, are not comparable. So British writers have to be looking at different sources of income. They're always writing new specs or writing new pitches for their contacts within the industry. Maybe they'll do 2 or 3 episodes of a show, and that will give them a year's salary. But they'll also be doing other things that they can't commit to one show, because that just puts you too much in a what's the word? It could be a dead end. If the show doesn't go anywhere, the show doesn't get made as successful, it can be a bit of a dead end. So you're always looking around. I mean, other writers do that too, but it's not. You can't sort of get hired at the beginning of the season and go, great, that's my mortgage paid for for a year. It's not let's have a beer down the town, everybody's happy. It's much more precarious than that. So I think that's the primary reason.
Interesting. And the other thing that I noticed in your bio is that you've done a number of scripts in different genres. You worked early as a sitcom writer. You've worked as a genre writer, as a procedural writer. That kind of thing is actually not very common here. People are encouraged very early. If you're a genre writer, that's how you brand yourself. Don't tell anybody you can write anything else, because they'll get confused about what kind of writing you do. Yeah. Is that easier in the UK to hop between those genres?
It's funny, people didn't know. I mean, I'd written like a whole season of Good Calm Hospital, and the commissioner at ITV went, "Oh, you've written a comedy, Porters? Is that you as well?" I was like, "Yeah, that's been out. That's my show." And nobody cared. But what was interesting for me was that I remember, I mean, part of my inspiration for wanting to do it was in the independent newspaper in the UK. This was ages ago. They serialized conversations with my agent, Rob Long's book about working on Cheers, and that, he was obviously a comedy writer, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a comedy writer. That was it. That was my dream job. And then there was there's no work in the UK. As a staff writer on a half-hour comedy, there was one show called My Family, which was actually run by an American guy, which did hire people at zero money to do that. But there was really nothing else. All half-hour comedy was, and still is, generally written by single writers or teams of writers, very individual voices. They write the whole thing. So for me to actually get work as a writer, I had to somehow manage to pitch my own original sitcom and get it made, which was a hell of a tall order and still is. Or I worked on continuing drama shows, which I didn't watch much of. I knew about them. I'd watched them as a kid, but I hadn't watched them for years. So then it was just really a sense of that's where the work was. I went there, and it was great because I learned. I was not a natural drama writer. I was much more naturally a comedy writer, and I had to learn to be a bit more serious. I had to learn how to do that. But then I found a lot of drama writers can't write a joke to save their lives, and they don't. What I thought, the quite weak jokes I was putting in my scripts, people were going, "This is incredibly funny." I'm like, "Really? You think this is funny? You should see some of the stuff on Cheers." But yeah. So that was really it. It was just that was where the work was, and then ever since then, I've always been the sort of person that I prefer to hide behind it. I don't want to be a personality. Why am I doing this? He asks. For me, great praise would be, "Oh, he did that as well. I didn't know that was the same guy." I like that idea that you can do different things. And I think that's a big dividing line between writers. I think some writers are very strong personality writers, and they write the voice, and everything they write, that's them. And there are other people who can move around, a bit like the difference between movie stars and character actors. And I was always much more comfortable being, the character actor, the one who was hiding, listening, and then producing something, rather than having to be, here's my performance of me again in this new film or this new thing. So I really like it, but I think it's something which defines you. What's your personality? But I do like doing different things. I get interested about this genre. Let's research this. Let's watch all the best movies. Let's see how the best people have done it, and see what I can come up with.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you is, because the series, what we call a season, are so much shorter, 6 hours or so. Is it an easier entry point? Like say, for instance, for a younger writer who had an idea for a series, here there's just so much money involved in producing a season of television that they won't give that to a baby writer. They'll maybe pair you with an experienced showrunner because they trust them with the hundreds of millions of dollars that it's going to take to make that season of television. In the UK, is it easier for a younger writer to get their show off the ground?
I don't know. I mean, certainly there is an infrastructure here for younger writers to be paired with experienced producers. I think our commissioners, our broadcasters, if they see somebody with a great track record as saying this writer's a great writer, they've got a lot of great voice, they've got something to say, we'll get the show to you, then I think that is the reassurance that the networks need, that they've got somebody who they trust, who has delivered shows for them before, who's backing this writer. And that, I think, is the key. So it's not that dissimilar. I mean, part of the thing we're doing with Seven Seas is trying to exactly get that vibe going, to say that, look, I'm an experienced writer. We've got some great guys that we're working with, and that I'll be able to help them with a lot of the stuff that I need help with. If the show gets commissioned, because there's that great thing, isn't there, where you spend months on your pilot, and then somebody finally goes, we love this is great, can you do 5 more? And you've got until May. What? And not many people can do that. And I think that's what most people who are like young writers or wanting to break in, don't really understand just how hard that is, that it never really gets that much easier. For me, I mean, having worked, I worked probably nearly 20 years-ish before I really got a big break and was writing my own shows. And when I started to write my own shows, I realized this was all on me. Then I was quite worried and quite tense. But I kind of thought, I can probably do this, I think, if I just keep going. If it had been my first show, in my first 2 or 3 years of my career, I think I would have lost it. And I know a lot of other people have had similar experience, who've had got a break early and have gone, God, it was too soon. It was too. They couldn't. Oftentimes they couldn't control the process, and people would be helping them the whole time. And then they thought, that wasn't helpful. But I was so desperate for advice, and I was so scared and so worried and so inexperienced, I just grasped at anything. Now some people have mature beyond their years and can get it. Often, if they come from, a show business background, or those are the ones who tend to be okay, I think, because they know how the game works. They've seen their parents doing it. But I think the ones like me who came from no connections at all, nothing, I think they are at risk of being swallowed up by the machine. And that's part of what Seven Seas is hoping to do, is to identify those people and work with them and go, look, we can help you, and hopefully help you in the right way, and not try and write it for you, or get our own glory out of it.
So with Seven Seas, do you solicit? How do you?
No.
No, I mean, how do you solicit these writers to come to pitch to you, or how does that work?
Well, we meet people. We meet people who are agents, send it to us, and we've got a good connection, I think, with the northeast of England, where we went to a Royal Television Society. We're doing a presentation, me and Simon, and I met somebody there who I'm working with, who's a really good local writer, who was saying she couldn't get which was finding it hard to get a connection, and then the fact that we came up to the north of England was a good thing. And so she's been working on the Mallorca files this year. I met her working with a writer I met at a script reading, which I was asked to go to and sort of be a judge of some kind of thing. And it was just a really good bit of material. But that's the one thing with 7 Seas is allowing access for people. I think just access is important. I mean, it's a very difficult job and it's very competitive. So there's not a lot of slots to write stuff. There's not a lot of slots to be an actor and a director, as you know. But I think trying to even up the access is really important. And there's there's increased awareness of the AME writers and performers who need access. But I think there's also people who are totally peripheral to the industry, people who've got no connections at all. Those are the people that we like to try and connect with because that's very hard. If your mum and dad have got no connection to the business and you're nowhere near London or any kind of production hub, you can seem a long way away.
If somebody were to just look up your company and give you a call, what are you looking for? From a writer, like if I was a writer, I hear this podcast and I think, hey, maybe I could work with 7 Seas. What would you want to see in a writer who was reaching out to you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think originality is really important. Increasingly, and this, I'm asking myself the same question all the time with all my own work: is what about this is interesting? What about this is new and interesting and innovative, and what can we do to make it stand out? Because you're just looking at the competition, not competition with the writers, but the competition with people. Why would everyone want to watch this? So it's that people asking themselves that question rather than this is my story, it deserves to be told. Because your story is normally quite dull, unfortunately, because you think it's because you think it's interesting. Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing for me is execution. Now, there's so much information available to people on podcasts like this. Like every script you ever want to read, you can read it, and every show you can watch it. There are loads of books you can read. I mean, I read all the books because I was a doctor. So what did you do? You read the books. I read all the textbooks. I was like, these textbooks, they're quite short, and they're all saying the same thing. So great. There's not that much to learn, and there isn't that much to learn when it comes to screenwriting. I mean, actually doing it is incredibly hard, but the basic kind of technique of it is very straightforward. So why haven't you done that? That's what frustrates me. It's like, why do people come with scripts that aren't formatted properly, don't look like another script at all? And you're going, why don't you just look up online what a number of times I sent the Walking Dead's pilot script by Frank Darabont out to people and gone, look at this, this is really good. We all need to try and do it like this, not sort of wafty nonsense that that. But then I think you're looking for people who are professional, and there are people who are I never really going to want to put the hours in because they don't realize how difficult it is. It's incredibly difficult. It's just hard work, grindingly difficult, hard work, much harder than being a doctor. I say that from my position, I can say that it's much harder. It takes longer to learn. Emotionally, it's much more difficult because this is your work. It's not just random people dying. It's like this is me. I'm being criticized. People are going on Twitter and going that everything you say is absolute rubbish and we hate you. So I think you're looking for people with a certain kind of quality, which is that weird mix of weirdness and a certain amount of professionalism and practicality. And that's quite unusual, I think. That's why not very many people are very successful at screenwriting in general, I think, because it is there's lots of people who are good writers and write good poems and can probably write a really good novel or a play or something. There's not very many people who can write and just deal with the kind of the general grind and practicality of creating something which has to actually be filmed in real life with in a real place with real people holding real things and keep smiling.
Yeah. Well, one question I really, really wanted to ask is, do you see many writers crossing the pond? Do you see many writers from the U.S. coming to UK and writing in the UK? Do you see many UK writers making the move to the US? And can it happen? And why would one be good over the other?
I have not seen many. I mean, we've had a couple of US showrunners come over and make shows on this side of the Atlantic. They're obviously very successful, very successful people. Hugely successful people, stars. There is, I think, an attraction for a quality American writer to come and write something authored. I think you'd have much more freedom to do that in this country if you could get the script commissioned, and I think the process with that would be very enjoyable if it was, if everything was flowing in the right direction. Obviously, lots of English writers have gone over to the US and made a big success. I mean, Patrick Harbinson was one who has worked on things like Homeland, and he had a show here. Well, that's been in the mid-90s, I think. We've got some shows in development in the US, and I've done some work with US companies in the past. And obviously, what you realise very quickly is that if you're going to do that, you pretty much have to be over there. If you're going to show run, you need to be in Hollywood or wherever it's shooting. And that's something that, at the moment, with my family situation, I'm not prepared to do. So it's a case of maybe you would write something and then hand it over, or you would, dip your toe in the water. But I think if you do want to do it, I think you have to do it all in, really, and go and do the whole showrunner thing and want to do it. So it's a case of practicality, really. But I don't think there's any fundamental reason why you wouldn't. I think that, from what I've heard, I think English writers would be surprised how hard you have to work to be a showrunner in the US. I know from my experience, when you're having to make a decision on a lot of stuff like props and characters and costume and things like that, I often delegate it when I don't think it's important enough. That sounds awful. What I mean is, I don't feel I have to make every single decision, because I realized that if I was making every single decision and insisting on making every single decision, then it would be just overwhelming. So I've several times just taken, working with people I trust. I'm going, great, that's fantastic. I'll take this set with Mallorca. I'll take the writing section. I'll do most of my work in pre-production as an executive producer, but I won't be on set the whole time, and I won't be in the edit the whole time, because I know that other guys can do that really well, and I can just watch some cuts and everything. I think that's, for me, that it's about pacing yourself, understanding what you can and can't do realistically.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time here. Where I usually like to end up is sort of advice to younger writers, and I guess in the UK context, the things that you've learned over the years, and you've interacted with a lot of younger, like people who are just starting out. What have you learned through the years that might help somebody who is maybe finishing college and getting ready to launch themselves in this industry as a writer? What kind of attitude, what kind of work ethic, what should they be focusing on?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, the thing that I learned, and I think is really important, and English people particularly are very bad at this, I think, is that understanding that you are, in some senses, the product as well. Just having a script is not the thing. People who are hiring writers are looking for somebody they can actually interact and work with. And that involves personal presentation, understanding what it is that makes you unique as a person and as a writer, and packaging that up in a non sort of naff way, but persuasive way, to say this is what you're getting. Not only are you getting a great script which I've written, but you're getting the credibility that I know the world. You're getting the fact that I can look you in the eye in a room, and while I'm not, you don't have to be, you're allowed to be an introvert. I mean, we're all introverts, but at the same time, you just have to have a certain sense of realism about your professionalism. I think that's what writers do badly. It's like, why, if you want to sit in a room and not talk to anybody, then there's lots of outlets for that. You do a novel, do whatever you want to do, but don't. I think people come, partly it's the glamour of the television, and partly it's the money. and I think it's easy. And I've always thought the reason jobs are only paid well if they're hard. Easy jobs don't pay well. You're working on the reason on an oil rig they pay you a lot of cash is that it's hard fucking work, and the same reason they pay successful TV writers a lot of cash is that even if you're successful, it's hard work and consuming. So I think it's being aware of that and understanding what you're trying to get into, and realizing it's a crossover between artistic endeavor and practicality, which I think is why a lot of lawyers and ex-doctors do quite well, because they're steeped in hard work. They understand graft when they have to graft, and they have to sort of get on with the people because they've worked in a professional environment. And actually, there's a lot of transferable skills between working in a law firm or in a hospital environment to working in a production environment. So that's the biggest thing. It's like, know what you're getting into and understand what it is. And then I think, when it actually comes to the writing, you're really looking for something which is a fresh take on a genre. I think the ones that I don't think work rarely work. There's never any absolutes, but is when I'm busting every genre out. I'm doing something completely unique. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before, and people read it and they don't get it. Like, it's too confusing. Maybe save that for when you've got. When people let you destroy your own career, that point every writer reaches when you've had a massive hit where they just allow you to make anything you want and make that one, and they'll put you back in the pack. But it's like fresh take on a genre, so a genre that people can understand, and hit it with a completely fresh twist, which is obviously easier said than done. But I think that's what you're looking for. Like, what's the fresh twist on a pop show? And those, I think, are the specs that really kind of cut through, because people realize that you understand genre, you can understand how to hit those beats. You've also got something different and interesting to say. So that's my advice. Look for that story. That's the. People always say that because, and then I can always hear people go, "But how do I find it?" And I don't think anybody can answer that. I think it's having an awareness all the time within your interactions with the world, like reading the newspaper, watching the news, whatever. You're always looking for something. If you always got your aerials out, looking for that one moment which allows you to, I could put those two things together. That's the fresh twist of a cop show. He's an alien or something, or whatever. That's, if you know what you're looking for, then you've got much more chance of finding it. If you're not sure what you're looking for, then you'll never notice it if it smashes you in the face. So I think that is the advice I would give creatively, is look for that angle and just be aware of it all the time, and just keep your aerials out the whole time, stuff like that. And then also be quick. Once you've got that thing, be aware that everybody else reads the same paper, everybody else is watching the news. Lots of people are desperate for a TV pilot hit idea. So it's a sense of being prepared to have the idea, think about it long enough, execute it, get it out there, and then move on to the next one. Don't hide for 18 months in your room, working on it, because you'll see it in TV Guide, next week, and you'll be going, "Oh, it happens to everybody. It happens so often." Yeah. But I think that's the biggest mistake people make, is like, how long should it take you? You should be able to turn it around in 3 months, maximum. From having the idea, if you've got nothing else to do in your life, having the idea to get a good script out, 3 months, 12 weeks. If you've got a job as well, maybe you can have an extra, 2 or 3 weeks. But that's what you should be trying to do. And then get that one out, move on to the next one. And then don't wait for it. Move on to the next one, move on to the next one. Because the great thing about it is, it's like, it is a lottery. You've got to be lucky. This is the thing. When I look back at the shows I've had made, so much luck was involved. Right place, right time, people changed, bosses moved, it got through. Somehow it didn't get knocked out of the game. But if you've only got one ticket in the lottery, you're probably going to get disappointed. The more tickets you can buy, then the more chance you have of being in the right place at the right time for somebody to go, "Do you know what we need now is a cop show, but one of them's an alien. That's what I need right now." And you're going, "I've got it." That's, I think, is if there's any secret for being successful, it's that sort of persistence is what's needed. What really, really did it for me was that when I realized that my standard, I was in the game. I said, I'm in the game in the sense that I was professional enough. People reading the script, they're going, this is great. I like this. This is funny. This is dramatic. We should make this show. I thought, I'm in the game. And now I need a bit of luck. Rather than, so then when I got an inevitable knockback of something, I know I didn't sort of go, I did go like that, but it didn't I wasn't upset for very long. Because I just thought, well, I'm in the game. I need to go again. If people are telling you, look, it's terrible, then maybe you're terrible and you need to learn more or try hard, or maybe it's just not for you. But if people are telling you you're making good material, then having that awareness that you just need a bit of luck now, and that driving you on to go buy more tickets, do more work, then you'll get it. That's the important thing to understand. It's tragic if people who are talented get knocked back once and then go, it's not for me, I'm no good, I can't do this. That's a real shame, because who knows what they might have come up with.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was listening very carefully to what you said, and every single thing you said there is 100% applicable here as well.
Well, good.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very important to point out that through all of the stuff that you described, you're continuing to work in the hospital as a doctor. So I think people don't have an excuse in terms of the time.
Only one day a week. You know, that's not that's not a lot. No, I refuse to sound like an absolute hero for that. I mean, I was, that's not the case. But it was a sense of, that persistence thing is really true. I mean, it's you've got to be lucky, and once you know you've got to be lucky, like acting. How lucky actors are there? They get a role in something, and they're like, it could have been anybody. I'm not mentioning names in case I ever work with them, but so many shows you think that could have been anybody, and they would be a megastar by now. They were just in the right place at the right time. And once for me, that just makes you go, okay, takes the pressure off. I think the good thing about writing, the more you can find things that take the pressure off, then it helps you. It's a good point. You have to edit it down. One thing that really helped me with the job was that it took the pressure off. I didn't have to earn a living at writing the whole time. I could earn a living. I was lucky I had a part-time job that paid quite well. It was as a doctor. I could earn a living. And then when I said, I'm not going to write the money gig, I'm going to write something else, that really helped me. I never felt this kind of all-crushing pressure as I must succeed as a screenwriter. And that is, if you can access that state of mind, that's really helpful. It's like in sports, isn't it? Because I'm a big sports fan, and you hear that all the time in sports, is that people choking under pressure. And it's those guys who can somehow perform at the highest level, but just not really care about it, who are the most successful. So I think there's a lot of overlaps, that we don't talk about. That and music as well. I mean, some people can sing naturally, but they take singing lessons, and they have voice coaches, and they work on it to get better and better. So people can write really well naturally, but a lot of them just stop then and go, well, I'm not going to read anything, learn about anything, think about stuff, because I'm going to spoil my gift. It's like, well, no other artistic form in the world does that. Yeah. But it's sports, singing, music, whatever. People with talent try and double down on their talent by getting as good as they possibly can be, and using everything they can to find that. And writers somehow, maybe it's more of the English thing. I think it probably is actually. Sort of just don't. No, I'm not going to read a book. Why would I read a book? Well, you don't have to do what the book says, but at least read it. Yeah.
Very cool. That is a great place to end up, and you've been very, very generous with your time. Please stay on the call just for a little bit after this, but sure. We'll wrap up this interview here. And Dan, I really, really appreciate you enlightening us to how things are done in the UK, how it's different than here, things that we can learn also. And I do wish you the best of luck with your company and in all of the shows that you're doing, and your doctor work too.
That's great. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to speak to you.
And that's it for today. Please watch for new episodes every Tuesday on all of the places you can find the podcast. Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, the TVWriterPodcast.com site, or also at scriptmag.com. Please do subscribe. Please do follow me on Twitter. @GrayJones is my handle. Also, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do it for as little as 25 cents per episode. You can find out how you can become a patron of the podcast or a sponsor of the podcast at tvwriterpodcast.com/support. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.